So I just want to welcome everyone here today. Good afternoon, I think I can say that. This is the last webinar in a series of 4. And my name is Audrey Wilson, and I'm the Partnership and Engagement Manager at the Scottish Council and Archives. And I'm going to be the chair for today's session. And on behalf of everyone involved, I just want to extend a warm welcome and a huge thank you all for joining us. So a little bit of a brief background on today's webinar. It's called Pay Me, My Money Down, Membership Grants and Other Funding Streams. It is sort of due to the work that we have been doing with the project Our Heritage, Our Stories, which was part of the Towards a National Collection programme, which comes to an end actually in January, but it has been going for maybe over 5 years. So it's a very large national project as well. And we are going to be having an in-person event on the 10th of March, I want to say. We will be putting everything in the chat room. So it'd be very nice if some of you as well will be able to come along to that. And that's going to be in the Arc Centre within the University of Glasgow. So today's webinar will explore, well, we're going to hear from 2 speakers, I want to say first. And our first is Dr. Abigail Glen, researcher on the project Our Heritage, Our Stories. She's got background in academia and community development and a passion for digital preservation of community archives. And then we're going to hear from Dr. Katie Jack, who is General Manager at the Scottish Railway Preservation Society, which is part of the Scottish Railway Museum in Bowness that many of you may know. So before we start, I just want to give you a couple of housekeeping notes. We are recording this session, so keep your cameras off if you don't want to be seen. We have got closed captions. If you want, you will just go to the bottom of your screen and you will see a little icon that's got 3 dots. Click on that and you can put on the closed captions if that is of use to you. If there's any sort of links and anything, we can then post them to you afterwards with a little bit of a feedback form, so you don't need to take lots of notes. So really, the main thing is to sit back and enjoy this. Use the chat room function to ask questions. At the end, there'll be time to ask lots of questions, and you can do this by actually putting your virtual hand up, and I'll look out for you. You can unmute, and you can ask the question yourself, or if you prefer, put your question into the chat room, and I'll ask it for you. Okay, see you soon. Bye. Over to you, Abby. Sorry, I should say.
Fine, Audrey, thank you so much. Thanks for that lovely introduction. Just get me slides. All right. Okay, can everybody see that? Someone give me a thumbs up. Fantastic. Great. So thank you very much for everybody for coming today. I'm Abi Glen. I'm the Research Associate for Archives and Impact on the OHOS project. So apart from academic grants, I was the lead fundraiser for the theatre charity Mischief Le Bas, and I'm currently convener for the charity the Greyhound Awareness League. So got lots of background. So this talk is kind of sort of Pecha Kucha style, so lots of little topics, because I'm hoping that we're going to have a big discussion later. I really love this image. I feel like it sums up trying to work or volunteer in heritage in 2025. So today we're going to be talking about 3 sort of main topics. The first is sector funding, the second is memberships, and the third is sort of alternative methods of funding and fundraising. So I'm a boring academic after all, so I'm sure you're all wondering where I got my information from. So from the majority of this talk, I've taken information from 2 major seminars and workshops that we held with Audrey. So we had Connecting Communities last April with a range of community archives across Scotland. Some of you might actually have been there that day. And the second was at an event in Northern Ireland held by Prony. So we had about 80 groups coming from across Northern Ireland and the Republic, and so we've taken this data, their qualitative contributions, and the following is kind of the main themes that came out from that. So sector funding, I'm not going to spend that much time speaking about this today because I'm sure you're all well aware of what's involved and what's available. So we've got the National Archives funding, National Heritage Lottery Fund, as they call themselves, I believe these days, local council grants. All of these are widely documented. But if you are looking for a steer, the CAHG website has though I say so, to kiss up, a fantastic funding page on their website. And there's also Find a Grant, which all government grants are required to be listed there. So that's a really good first port of call. Let's talk about membership. So the first thing to address is that understandably, at the moment, we're all living through a cost of living crisis. So there's a huge reticence to ask for donations and or to charge for anything, really. So a membership model can work really, really well as you can introduce sliding scales. Also, just wanted to continue on that point that there's also an understandable worry at the moment about how heritage is being perceived, and that's something that's come up time and time again. So how can we as archives or charities ask for money when basic needs aren't being met? I wish that I had the answer to that. If I did, I'd probably have a bestseller on my hands. But one thing that I have learned from talking to a huge group of people and from my research is that it's really worth spending some time considering the particular value that your archive or collection brings to your particular community and using that as a springboard for everything from funding applications to narrative. So I mentioned sliding scales, but with membership often comes kind of gifts and incentives. They really, really don't need to cost much or anything at all. So it's worth being creative. You can reach out to your partnerships, anyone in your network who might be able to contribute to this. So for example, at the Greyhound charity, we work with, my Greyhound just barked. Yeah, thank you. So at the Greyhound charity, we work with a local chain of pet shops and they deliver gift vouchers for anyone who adopts, and they give us bags of treats that are otherwise surplus so we can hand them out at the weekly walks that we have, and this is a really nice way to sort of thank our volunteers. Oh, this old chestnut. They say you got to spend money to make money. Of course, the punchline, if anyone has seen this episode, is, and we spent a lot of money when his business is failing. I think in 2025, this largely means that you just need to invest in your comms strategy. A one-off payment to a PR consultant, if you can manage it, who works in heritage, can really reap dividends. Obviously, websites are extremely expensive to set up and maintain. I'm not going to patronize any of you by talking to you about social media. I'm sure you're all using it. But there are other ways to work on your comms which require like less of an outlay and don't need to be updated so quickly. So I'm a huge proponent of Substack for heritage. So you're probably all familiar with it, but for the uninitiated, Substack is a publishing platform. It's used by journalists and writers and artists of all different kinds, some really established, some brand new. So you can set articles to be free or parts only available to paid subscribers. And you can use a sliding scale for subscriptions as well. So it's a really great way to share your collection and to learn from other heritage professionals. One of my favorites here is Georgina Brooks. She writes something called Cultural Content. Some of you will probably be subscribed to. It's about the intersection of web content and the cultural sector. And she also, as you'll see, cleverly uses a lot of guest writers. Bon Jovi is up on my screen, which means we are halfway there. Oh, yeah, you all got it. I'm sorry, I'm trying desperately to just keep alive during this January. So if there's anything got anybody, is everybody sort of okay so far? Nothing too horrendous. I can't say I'm keeping an eye on the chat, but Marissa's nodding at me, and when Marissa nods at me, I feel comforted and safe. So thank you very much. There we are. Oh, John. Anyway, moving on. Internships. So working with your local universities that have information studies or museum studies programs, a lot of students want to gain experience in this area, and many courses and organizations will support them to do internships or courses within your archive. So one example at Glasgow Uni that we're doing at the moment is setting up internships for information studies students to work with the Kinloch Historical Society up in Lewis. So this is really mutually beneficial setup because it means that the students get this hands-on experience with the collections over several months or a year that they might not otherwise have had. And the archive benefits from the students' kind of up-to-date knowledge of IS and all the latest tech as well. Speaking of technology, letting technology help is always key. I'm thinking back when I look at this picture of during the pandemic when I just watched the National Theatre online, like on a loop. So if you have equipment, you can, or if you can borrow it or rent it, you can record or hold Zoom lectures, virtual tours of your collections for a really small ticket price. And some archives that I know of do record these and then hold them behind a paywall on their website. All the better is to do a live one as well, just similar to what we're doing now, and just kind of have it for people who can't come and visit the museums themselves. It's also a really nice nod to accessibility. Crowdfunding. Not wrong with a bit of crowdfunding occasionally. If you need to raise money for archiving a specific collection or restoring a specific object, or buying a piece of equipment, then feel free to use, obviously, crowdfunding for websites like Just Giving. This is something that major museums do as well all the time. My main advice here, and something that I've learned from speaking to our focus groups, is to really work on the narrative carefully. People really respond to a story. So yeah, worth doing. So the next one is a little bit controversial. So commercial enterprises, this is something that came up a couple of times in our focus groups, and it does tend to stoke the most controversy. On the one hand, I obviously agree that we should all be funded and supported properly by national bodies that are supposed to be interested in preserving our history. But on the other, I also appreciate that we live in a late capitalist society, which particularly at the moment seems absolutely desperate to make sure we don't have nice things. So there's nothing to be said. Yeah, thanks, Katie. She just gave me a thumbs up. So there's nothing to be said against working a little bit with that, not against the grain. So one example we've got here is Paisley Heritage. I'm not sure if the lads from Paisley Heritage are here today. They might be. So they're an organisation dedicated to preserving and promoting Paisley and its history, and they do that through guided tours, through education, and through restoration projects as well. So the things that they sell, sort of mugs, tea towels, artwork, in the main are locally designed and made, and then the money is poured back into their events and to keep their key services running. So the convener, when he spoke about this, decided to do it because he didn't want to be beholden to funding cycles. And for him, it was about taking a bit of control back and actually, ironically, taking some stress off his plate. Katie is going to talk a lot more about this, but here is a handy Venn diagram about retaining volunteers, and retaining volunteers is one of the best ways to sort of maintain stability within your organisation. Some archives in the discussion groups floated incentives. They're quite tricky. I don't know if anybody remembers when they brought in the US model of paying folks for blood donations, and actually blood donations in the UK went down. I think partly because people like the sense of altruism that doing it for free gave them. So that's something to bear in mind if you are thinking about that. Oh, legacy. This one's a bit grim. I always feel a bit. Oh. So this is an interesting one. Obviously, hopefully, these are really slow to realise, but they absolutely can be worth the effort of procuring one and ensuring one, as they tend to obviously be a bit larger in scale, and then you can use those in a sort of planned way for investments as well. Worth thinking about. Speaking of bodies, your board. So many or most of you will have a board or a committee, especially if you're registered as a charity. One thing that kept coming up again, particularly in Ireland, is with our Irish fellows, is, are your board pulling their weight? It's a rude question, but are they pulling their weight? Could they be upskilled in some way? Would training help, or even just a more invigorating type of meeting, or bringing some sort of fresh blood into your board as well with new ideas? It is a tendency to kind of stick with folk, but things like everything else can get stale. I was saying to everybody before I started this talk, funding and the begging for funding is really depressing, and I want, like Ted Lasso, to go out like Willie Nelson on a high. So I wanted to say to everybody that's going to be joining the discussion, or you can put it in the chat, if you can tell me something you're optimistic about for your archive for the next year, please. That'd be amazing. Just do it for me, so I don't feel like I'm speaking into the ether. But yeah, thank you very much for listening. I'm aware that was a whistle-stop tour, but I hope some of it was of use. Thanks very much, everyone.
Now, Abi, thank you very much. I have actually written lots of sort of notes actually myself about things, and I'm now going to be thinking about something optimistic. Actually, I've got quite a few things I can share with people, so I'm very keen to hear what everyone else has to say. But you did mention volunteers, and I know that our next speaker, Katie, is going to be talking a bit about volunteers as well as everything else. So I'm going to now pass over to Dr. Katie Jack, who again is the General Manager of the Scottish Railway Preservation Society, which of course is part of the Scottish Railway Museum at Bo'ness. So over to you, Katie.
Fabulous. Thank you so much. Well, hopefully everything maintains. I'm talking about my internet connection. I've moved to the kitchen on site because we've got people having lunch where I was sitting before. So bear with me if things do crop up. But just thank you as well to obviously to everybody for having me here today. But also there were so many points in Abi's talk that I was kind of furiously nodding away there, and I was like, that's it, exactly, that's it, especially with the commercial aspect of trying to keep ourselves afloat, because it is so true, and people do think it is quite a dirty endeavor in some ways, but it is also quite necessary. So it really is just trying to find that balance. So I'm going to share my slideshow. So hopefully everybody will be able to see that. Yes, absolutely. I'm just going to pull up my own notes. Fab, excellent. Just because I am stepping in on site today, and she has very kindly given me some notes to work from. So it's not my usual kind of off the cuff speaking, if you like, but I do think it is important that we still share the kind of the things that we've learned from this project, this kind of case study. So I will start. Let me just check. Right, I'm all over the shop today. So hopefully you can still see everything. Is that all right?
Katie, I just want to say you're not on slideshow.
Yeah. Yep. Are you good? Oh no.
Yep. We were hearing you, Katie, to be honest.
Okay, hopefully it's back.
Yep.
Is that, yeah,
I can hear you. It doesn't matter
right.
if we don't go on to the full screen. It's just to let you know that we can sort of see the top bits.
Brilliant. Just I'm trying to read my notes, and I thought, oh my god, if I pull up the whole screen, then I can't actually see my notes. So there we go. So I thought you talk at all, in which case, so there. So as long as you can see that, and we're on project summary, which
We are.
hopefully, yes, fabulous. That's good news. Okay. So the Museum of Scottish Railways funded directly from the museum's budget, really with that purpose of preserving the documents relating to the large and technical collections. So public interpretation and digitization projects, they've really tended to prioritize details of the professional operation and the men who ran it, and it's really skimmed over the social networks that supported them. So this case study is really just designed to describe how we independently approached our first funder in order to digitize the Lumsden Horn Railway Family Archive. And that archive reveals lived experience of railway communities in all their vibrant diversity, and in working to uncover that community of voices within our collections, we really discovered this wealth of support that was available to us, and we really learned just how much we, as that small archive, powered by passionate volunteers, which I know Abi gave a nod to, really had to offer the potential funders. So the organisation. The Museum of Scottish Railways, as we discussed there in the introduction, it is part of the Scottish Railway Preservation Society, but it is Scotland's largest railway museum, with a working collection and a living line that keeps heritage skills alive and connects people to the kind of sights, the sounds, the smells of our shared industrial past. So it's a 5-mile line between Bo'ness and Manuel, and then we do still have steam trains and diesel locos that run up and down that line throughout our opening season. But in recent years, we've seen a real upward trend in archival donations from the broader railway community. So we now care for about 45,000 photographs acquired from prominent photographers of the railway scene, and there are so many photographers of the railway scene. But we've also seen an extensive array of personal and family documents, you know, diaries, wartime correspondence, and railway-inspired artworks, which has just been absolutely fascinating to see come into the archive. As far as funding challenges go, internal funding is traditionally derived from the museum budget, which out of necessity has tended to prioritise the large objects and the working collection to ensure that we can maintain our living railway, because we can't run a steam railway if we don't have steam locos for people to sit with. But really what we want to do is, because it's prioritised those large objects and the working collection to ensure that we can maintain that living railway and the intangible heritage association with it. But by contrast, small objects and archives have been classed as requiring less attention, or at least cost neutral, for lack of a better term. So the museum and 3D object collection receives positive support from external funders, but the archive hasn't really benefited in any targeted way from those projects to date. So archive staff have often been diverted to funded collection projects, which has meant less resource in this area, not more, because this is one of the things that I've really had to come to grips with in heritage. Is that we might want to go for these funded projects, but a lot of the time that does divert resources from other things. So it is making sure that you do have those resources in place, and volunteers are fantastic for that, for keeping us going. So where funding, either internal or external, has been secured for public interpretation and that dissemination of people's histories, the focus has been on official railwaymen's narratives, and it's really overlooked the stories of the families, those community networks that supported the industry. So I think this has unintentionally reinforced that perception of the industry as a kind of closed off man's world that acts as a barrier for broad audience engagement, which is obviously at the core of what we're trying to do. So it is important to us that the Museum of Scottish Railway is seen as a resource for everyone, for all, not just that specialist repository. So personal and familial stories, they need to be made more generally accessible in order to accurately represent the social history of Scotland's railways. So we recognise that the capacity to pursue an independent fundraising strategy, not contingent on the needs of the object collection, was absolutely imperative to meet that changing need of the archive collection. So on to the project itself. So in 2024, we acquired the Lumsden Horn Railway Family Archive, created and informally curated by Station Master's wife, Isabel Horn. It brings together the family papers of 3 generations of a single railway family, and it really opens that window onto the culture and the social concerns of railway communities in the pre-beaching era. So informal snapshots that are included in this, they capture that daily life in and around stations up and down the country, the progressive changes in the built environment, leisure activities such as the camping coach holiday, and even mid-century fashion trends, which is fascinating to look at. And the letters relating to Station Master Richard Lumsden's activities as part of 164 or 164 Railway Operating Company during World War II add to that national record. But it's the domestic letters between his wife and his family, the dialogue with the same, they provide that valuable insight into the life on the home front in Scotland. So in digitising those wartime letters, the images, the diaries, we really saw that potential to fill lived experience gaps in the official record, to make those new voices heard, improve the representation in our accessible archive. And we really hope to encourage people to come forward with their own domestic and community stories of making a home on the rails. And really, we're trying to avoid, as much as possible, the risk that these are going to be lost, which is the constant fear of anybody that works in archives and heritage. We also hope to facilitate encounters with street scenes and settlement schemes that have either been swept away or they've been changed beyond recognition. And we really wanted to connect people to their places and their shared history. So there really is that, that theme of connectivity and togetherness. And finally, we did anticipate that siloed materials relating to the wartime activities of railway families could really provide substantive value to existing military and genealogical researchers. So there's that as well. On a more practical point, preparing to approach funders. So one of the core things that we recognise is that need to define a clear objective. So before any application, and a lot of this, obviously people that have done this before will know this, but for some of us who are just starting out, before any application for funding could go ahead, we really focused on establishing that clear strategy for the project. So rather than be tempted to try to adapt the funders' aims and risk a project that didn't serve our purpose, we spoke to trustees, we spoke to our volunteers, we spoke to the public, local stakeholders to really establish the needs, the wants and the aims of the project. But it's also reflecting on the simple but significant things that are going to capture a funder's attention aside from match funding. So for us, that was volunteer commitment. Volunteers are engaged in every single aspect of our work, and they are a core asset in the pursuit of our mission. Our people they're our most powerful resource. It's as simple as that. They're our most significant source of funding in kind. And in 2024, around 8,000 hours have been donated to the archive, which is an immense in-kind contribution that really communicates that pride, that positivity, that commitment of the team as a collective. And volunteer support shows people care about our work, and that's the most important thing. It's so tangible, and all funders are more excited by a prospect that others are excited to be a part of. It's that kind of infectious energy, if you like. The second was excellent customer service. So we stay in close contact with our object donors, and we make decisions regarding use collaboratively where possible, and we keep them appraised of the impact that their donation has had on visitor engagement and research. So it's this constant dialogue between us and the object donors. And we know from the feedback we receive that this personal touch matters to people. So we've applied this care for communication to our relationships with those who donate funds to help us maintain our archive. We encourage dialogue, we give them first-hand experience of what their money is being spent on, and we give regular progress and impact updates, which people love to see. And I think this approach, which really facilitates real involvement and encourages donors to feel ownership over it and pride in the work they're funding. And engaged donors are more likely to invest in the future and to advocate for the archive in their turn. So it really is that gift that keeps on giving, to use a cliche on a Tuesday afternoon. Focusing that valuable contributions in kind we bring to our work every day, it really built our confidence, I think, as an organisation. We came to write our application, our passion, our excitement and our commitment really shone through in the submission. So moving on to the application process itself. So when we were confident of what we wanted to do and what we realistically had to offer, we were prepared to approach our chosen funder. So we'd identified the TownsWeb Archiving Digitisation Grant as best fitting our needs, and we checked that our project was eligible, so crucial, by reviewing the criteria and resources carefully on the website. And then before we applied, we talked to the funder. And Nathaniel, who I'll have a quote from in the next slide, talked us through the process, answered all of our initial questions. And I think his insight and enthusiasm, as well as that opportunity to build rapport ahead of any project, was real added value. And these interactions were a growth opportunity that would still have delivered valuable experience and the resilience to explore future opportunities in the face of rejection, which is all too common in this very difficult climate. I do obviously have some quotes from funders there. Obviously, first one on the screen, which hopefully you can still see, by Nathaniel. That's the TownsWeb Archiving donated about £3,000 to the project. George Lumsden, who is actually one of our volunteers, he is active on site as a volunteer, has been helping us go through the collection with Vicky sitting in the office and kind of going through all these bits and pieces. And just the throwaway comments that you get from George when he's just kind of, oh, I remember this, and back in the, it's incredible to sit and listen to that. And obviously an archive volunteer, which we do get a lot of our volunteers are so actively involved in what we've got, and whether that's financial support, whether that's just giving us their time, their expertise, it really is, it's incomparable. So looking at project impact and evolution, which is obviously absolutely key to think about once we've finally done the project. The digitisation of the wartime letters and the post-war diaries of Isabel Lumsden, it's still progressing. We've had strong engagement from the community with a series of oral histories designed to capture more testimonies planned, and wives and relatives of railwaymen who once asked, why would you be interested in my story, can now see their place in our archive, which I just think is absolutely sensational. But schools as well have shown interest in a proposal to build a station master's garden on site at Bowness, guided by Isabel Lumsden's recollection of her garden at Ladies Bridge. So this initiative really would connect that archive to wider organisational well-being, and environmental and placemaking objectives, which is so crucial just now. And it also helps us, I think, with the fact that we have to fight this legacy as a railway of dirty heritage, which is the kind of term that's cropping up now and then. Obviously, steam, diesel, these things that are fossil fuels, not great for the climate, but people love the experience of it, so we're trying to offset that in any way we can. So we aspire to complete our public-facing website by the end of 2025, which will open up 2 distinct pathways to discovery. So one, catering to the needs of historians and professionals engaged with national and global level academic conversations, but also one serving the needs of general users and just railway enthusiasts. And all material that isn't covered by copyright will be available to download freely as part of our mission to share railway stories as widely as possible. And an intergenerational, that's a mouthful, living exhibition, which will bring examples of material from this project into conversation with visitors in the museum, is due for completion in 2026, generously supported, I have to say, by a grant from Museum Galleries Scotland. So just very quickly moving on to reflections. I feel like I've been speaking for ages. But previously, obviously, we were relying on our parent organisation for funding, like so many of us are. But we now, as a team, have that confidence and the skills to access a greater range of funding sources. And we understand the value. I think this is so crucial. We understand the value that we bring to a project, and we know how to articulate clear objectives to ensure that any project serves our strategic aims and the best interests of the archive and its people. And volunteers seeing their contributions valued as highly as match funding have greater well-being outcomes, which is something that we're really starting to see come to the fore. Our people are our biggest and most valuable resource, and we need to keep supporting that. But also communicating them. I know that Abi talked about this with the board, and we have a very involved board at SRPS, and I report directly to them. But communicating our fundraising activities and the benefits derived from the same has actually led to a better internal understanding of the need to invest in our archive. And with Vicky's support and all the wonderful volunteers, we now actually convinced the board to give us funding for a new custom designed archive store that is going to safeguard our collections for the future. And what that will also mean is that people will actually be able to come in, enjoy the collection, engage with the collection, touch the documents, and feel that they are back in connection with their history. So yeah, that is everything from me. So hopefully you've got everything you need. And that you heard me, because God forbid if I did all of that and then you actually didn't hear any of it, then I'll be absolutely devastated. But there we go.
Yes, no, we did hear, and I just hope people can't hear a bit of work that's going on in my garden. But I hopefully won't be talking, and people who are on this webinar will be talking. I mean, there was just a couple of things that I was interested in, and one was maybe, Katie, just because you're still with us at the moment, I feel that you've got some funding, and it has actually gone on to more funding opportunities. So it's like getting over that initial hurdle has then allowed you to, I mean, moving your archive, I mean, into a better space. I mean, that's a very big job. So interested to know when that's going to happen. But how do you think, was it really just, what was the sort of first thing you did? What would you give people advice that have never actually gone for funding before?
I think, do you know, for me, it's asking for help. I think that there is a lot of when we're trying to get out there, there's a very kind of misconception. I get this a lot, even now, just joining this role, of people just saying, well, just get some funding for this. We want to do this, so just get some funding, as if it's as easy as putting pen to paper and you send it out, you're guaranteed to make money, and then everything's fantastic. It's not as easy as that. And I think that one of the mistakes that I used to make early on in my kind of grant applications was thinking that I had to do the entire thing by myself, that I couldn't actually reach out to other organizations that were similar to me, or even ones that aren't similar, and asking them how they approached it, how they did it, what did they find worked, have they spoken to the same funder that I'm going for, and is there kind of red flags that they thought, actually, they hated that, don't do that, it's not worth your time. And I think that's so crucial to have that. And I think it's being able in your mind to show them, at least if they ask, show them what you plan to do with the funding, or what you plan to do even after the funding's finished. And I think that's been really key for us, the kind of Towns Web archiving stuff, is that we were able to say, well, the goal is hopefully to move the archive once we've digitized it, make it more accessible. And then that meant that I could go to the board and say, well, actually, here, they're doing this fantastic thing. Why don't we give them a better building instead of having them sit with their kind of 3 fleeces on and their joggers, kind of sitting in these things. And it worked. And I think now that we've done that, other archives and other organizations are taking notice, and they're saying, oh, well, hey, we can help you with that. Maybe the moving costs, maybe get you some better heating, maybe get you some better, relative humidity sensors. So I think that, for as much as that's a rambling answer, ask for help. Always just go to people and just ask for help. And then think about what you're going to do when that project is finished, which can seem really daunting, but it's as easy as just putting some bullet points as, we're hoping to get this, and then after that, maybe that will lead to this.
I'm going to unmute. So what I've got up on my screen is I've got all the people. So if anyone does want to ask a question and they can unmute, very happy for that to happen. Please either put your hand up virtually or just wave at me, because I can see you all. Not everyone's got their camera on, but I can see you. Did you talk a little bit about the Towns Web archiving, the grant that you received? Because that was for digital. That's a real digital exercises, and that's in some ways why we are all here, is because we're interested in that digital content of community groups. So how easy? I mean, that was great. I mean, that's quite a good size of money, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. And I think I remember when Vicky came to me and told me that she'd got the funding, I think she was absolutely astonished. I think especially because it had been kind of announced, we kind of watched the YouTube announcement, and it was us with other huge organizations, and we were kind of just assuming that we were this little archive kind of in the out in the sticks that wasn't going to get anything like that. But I think what it showcased for us, and it gave us that inspiration, which is so important when you're working with volunteers. You really need to be able to give them tangible proof that people are interested in the work that they're doing, and that there's that kind of, look, they've given us money to do this. Like, so all of that work that you're doing, it's leading to something. And I think it's giving us that opportunity to not only digitize the archives and make them accessible, which is so important because we already have links to different universities, but also members of the public that can't actually come to site anymore, but still want to engage with the collection. That's important for us to make it accessible, but also helping us look at our digital footprint as a whole. It's actually given us, because of the funding that we went for, we really had to look at our own presence. How are we using our social media? How are we engaging the public with our archives? Does anybody even know that we have an archive? Which I think a lot of people weren't aware of, because they come here and they think we're just trains. So yeah, that was crucial to us, not just because it's digitizing, but it's all the offshoots and the benefits that came from that. So I think, yeah, we're absolutely, I say stoked there. I was like, I'm so stoked, but it's like, I was like, come on, Katie, what year are we in? it really is exciting to see what it could mean. So it's not just that £3,000 that we got from them and the digitisation potential. It's given us the thought process as to what else can be changed as a result of this. So yeah, super exciting.
Yeah. That's great. Nicola, I can see you've got your hand up. Would you like to unmute and ask a question?
Yes, I'm just a bit confused about Townsweb archiving. Did you get a grant from them to do the digitisation work, or did they do the digitisation work for you for free, or did they give you money to use
They've given us the grant. Yeah, they've given us the grant, so we're doing the digitisation, we're uploading all of the work. I think what we're also looking at the minute is figuring out the best platform to do that on. I think we're looking at PastView. We're trying to look at other kind of organizations and sites that have similar kind of collections to us. So yeah, so we're doing that. It's very much going to be a volunteer-driven project, but it's the funding that gave us the means of securing the software and things that we needed to actually get that ball rolling.
So why didn't Townsweb do the work themselves? Because I thought that they were a digitisation company. I didn't know they gave grants. Am I being a bit daft here?
No, honestly, I actually don't know why they didn't do that, but I can certainly find out for you.
But they gave you the money and you then spent it somewhere else.
True.
Okay.
I can ask for you, certainly. Yeah.
No, that's fine. Yeah, it was yeah. I didn't know they worked like that, so that's actually really, really, really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And no, that's the thing. And I think it's always worth just, like I say, because we've got Vicky, who I know that she's not here today, but yeah, it's interesting to see that. And that's another thing I think about speaking to the funders and asking them about things, because there's so many things that in the past I've been a bit like, well, I'll not approach them because that's not what we're looking for. They don't actually do what it is I think they do. But actually being able to go to them and just say, actually, this is the idea. Is that something that you guys are on board with? Yes or no? And then they'll be able to tell you, and they might actually have something or a service that you didn't think they did, but they do.
Yeah, I'm going to say, Nick, that might be helpful is I think as well that particular, I think there were 3 people who groups that won, and it was through the Archives and Record Association, so the professional body for archivists, and it was announced at their annual conference. So probably doing that again this year, I'm going to say. So maybe look on their website. But it is something that we at Scottish Council and Archives will also be putting into our newsletter, and we will be promoting on social media. So do look out again for any sort of funding opportunities. We will try and include them in our monthly newsletter. And not plugging here, but we are free to join. So if you would like to be a member, you will receive a newsletter. Just go onto our website and you can sign up from there. So hopefully, Isabel, I have given you the answer. So to get the newsletter, just go onto the Scottish Council and Archives website. I'm sure Marissa will be putting the website, maybe even the link in there, and you'll get the newsletter. I also want to remind people, because I know some people have left, that we are recording this, so we will be, don't worry if you do miss anything. I feel as my dog has entered the room. He's making a lot of noise.
I love it.
He's a crazy Spaniard, I have to say.
You have to show us now. You have to show us.
He's just going a bit mad.
Star of the show. Star of the show.
I mean, here.
They're like toddlers.
Audrey is very, very used to my.
Oh yes, yours is lovely and soft and gentle. Mine's a lunatic. Just try to get to Canada. Anyway, enough of dogs. Something Never. Actually, sorry, I just want to go into, because I don't see anyone else's hand up at the moment, but I want to say, Abby, you're on both sides of this because you've received significant funding, but you're also fundraising. And what would you say? I mean, obviously it's nice to receive money, but did you feel there were certain things that you wish you could have not had to do for the funder, if you like?
Yeah, so it's a running joke between a group of my friends. We all work in sort of heritage or voluntary sectors as well, or have done. And the sort of running theme is bring back patrons. It would be great. It would be so great if we could just have those sort of great expectations level, secret patronage. I would do that. I'd go for dinner twice a month. That would be fantastic. So I feel that there's a different kind now in this digital age, I think, of what you are effectively trying to do is get patronage. And The problem is now is that you have to fail so many times before you figure out how to make it successful, and that is exhausting and it is expensive, and sometimes it just wipes people out, which is why I think like these kind of webinars and things, I'm really hoping that they're actually going to be practically useful. But the problem is that you do actually have to do that. And I think Katie's suggestion about sort of crowdsourcing a sort of brain trust about how to get past, because we all know after experience that there are some funders that are, you get to know their peccadillos. But again, that's something you can only do while you're in situ, which is really, really tricky. Yeah, I have spent more hours than I care to count doing. It's never pointless, because you will always learn something, or at least there's something you can cut and paste or reuse, or it does force you to think about what you actually require. But it's a time sink, and time, unfortunately, is money, ironically, in this regard. So yeah, and also it's, I've referenced this a couple of times when I was speaking, but it is also just attempting to tune out the massive negativity, because it's realistic. We are all under an enormous amount of pressure. There's very little money. We are relying on volunteer passion, which is rapidly running out because people are not able to run their normal lives. So, effectively, and I could rail on forever about governmental failings in that regard, but ultimately there is a bit of hope. There's still opportunities, there's still funding, there's still abilities, and I think we are all more connected than ever, and therefore like sort of sharing that information and sharing the sort of optimism and buoying up can be really, really useful as well. So yeah, reaching out to your networks is about the only thing that you can do at the moment, and commiserating. I know the university is doing, oh God, what is it called? It's like salon de pas de succès. It's basically an official thing for the university for anybody who's been rejected for a grant application. You all meet at the same place at the same time once a month. Everybody drinks coffee and possibly something else, and complains, and has that like moment of just going, oh, I can't believe that and it's great because it means you're seeing it all over, because it's so easy to get silent and be like, well, the chemists get all the money, and it's not, that's not true either. So something like that can be really helpful. Or you can always just go to the pub. So yeah, a rambling response to your question, Audrey, but
yeah. No, but Katie, I can see you've got your hand up. Maybe you'd like to add to that.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I could not agree more. Literally everything that Abby said there, I was like, yes, all of that, yes. Especially just the commiseration. I think it's so easy to get caught up in your wee office, or wherever it is that you work from. You're sitting at your laptop, you're typing away, and then you get the rejection, and it just feels, it's soul destroying when you've put so much work into it and you think it must just be me. They hated my project, they don't like the work we're doing, why do I bother? And then actually you speak to everybody else and they're like, oh, they didn't like my fundraising landscape. But I think also worth, I know you patrons, I was at, before I came into this role, I was with Perth Museum, the new museum that we just opened in Perth, and that was great, but part of that was fundraising was a huge task. And a part of that was, well, we'll get patrons, we'll just bring patrons in, and we only really did that in the final year before we opened. And the amount of time that went into trying to locate local funders, local patrons, people that were interested. These are relationships that take years to develop. This isn't something that we could just go in at the last gasp and just say, by the way, could you give us £50,000? That'd be awesome. So I think it's worth remembering that as well, that kind of flexibility for patrons. If you could just offer this over the next 5 years, and then maybe by year 10, we'll up it to this amount of money, and then by year 20, scale of what it is that you're looking for and what grant or approach is going to be best suited to that, before you actually just start going down a path that is just not going to give you any results anytime soon, and then you just give up, which we don't want you to do.
I'm unmuting. Nicola, you have your hand up actually. Is there something you'd like to add?
Yes, it was just I'm in this seminar because I've just started working with a historic railway, a miniature historic railway. And I just wondered, Katie, whether we could hook up on a one-to-one basis at some point, whether I could get your email address. Don't know the best way to do that.
We can, if the speakers are happy, I'm going to say we can give out their details as well. We'll pass it on. So we will send you a very brief feedback. It's always very good to find out what you think as well about the webinar. If there's anything we've missed you'd like to know more about, we're very happy to provide you with links and all the rest of it as well. So yes, Nicola, don't worry, we will pass on Katie's email address to you. I actually just want to say one of the problems, sorry, with little small funding is when the money runs out, and obviously that legacy, and you both mentioned legacy in one form or another, and I think, I mean, I'm thinking of really, like, I'm seeing someone, Jane Metcalf, is from the Isle of Coll, so I'm thinking that is pretty small. You know, you don't want to do lots and then can't do anything else. You know, you want to be able to keep going. So sort of building in legacy, is that important, do you think, to funders? I think of Coll actually as well, Jane, you might have nothing to do with it, but I think of Project Trust, which is actually fantastic at raising funds. So I don't know how you manage it all in with such a small number of people. Jane, are you willing to tell us?
Okay, with great difficulty. And you've mentioned Project Trust there, and that's quite a blow to the island because they are pulling out completely. So, you know,
where are they going?
Well, all the staff will work from home.
Oh gosh, okay. So is that sort of a post-COVID?
Well, COVID really damaged them. They had to make people redundant, and it didn't go back to the model before that.
Right.
They did recruitment online and all that. So I suppose we had an inkling, but it's still been a bit of a blow. Yeah,
I can imagine. I mean, you know, is that any sort of funding that stops in a small community would be a big blow as well.
It was more than that. It's very involved with the community. But anyway, never mind. It's not really to do with this.
No, sorry.
So we're very, very small, membership of about 17, and we do have a membership subscription of £10 a year. And at the moment we're struggling. We had a management committee, but because we couldn't make decisions because there weren't enough people turning up, I've gone back to all members being part of the committee meetings. And that resulted in 4 people last night, you know. So if you talk about struggle, we keep talking about funding. It would be so nice to have a website, something like Tyree's and Elan one. But we don't actually have the people to run it, you know, even if we got the funding to do that, it's that legacy.
Yeah.
And I know about that legacy more from my role in working at the community centre, which is run by the Development Trust, and is a fantastic centre, but the struggle to keep that going just consumes the trust every minute, you know. And I was involved in that, and I just, in a small island, there's only so much you can burden a community with. Yeah, so it's really tricky. And I love the patrons thing, but I don't know how you go about it.
No.
I mean, is that helpful?
Yeah, it is helpful. I mean, one of the things, so I do work with Museums, Galleries Scotland, and they have heritage forums, Jane, that you might know about, which would be covering, I'm thinking the one that might be for you. I don't know if there's, I mean, there's ones and it includes like Argyll and Bute and stuff like that, and I don't know if Coll would be part of that. And they very much favour grant applications from, you know, having partners, so that you would be working with maybe Tyree, or you'd be working with Egg, or I don't, you know, so I don't know if that's any help as well. You can send me an email and I could pass you on the person I know at Museums Gallery Scotland, if that was any help.
Yeah, I'm a member of the Argyll and Bute Museum and Heritage.
Right.
Yeah, and the group is as well, independent and group. So when I can, I've got several other hats.
Right. Okay.
This is my passion.
Yeah.
but I've taken on other roles in the community and they're rather overpowering me at the moment.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Okay.
And I'm retired as well.
Yes. No, I think you are wearing many hats, and it is as well. It's volunteering. Something actually I just want to mention to maybe everyone, if they've not thought about it, but it's something that Scottish Council and Archive are very much part of, is an online portal for volunteers and for organisations. It's free to join. It's called Make Your Mark. And they're trying to diversify the people who are involved in volunteering. The one great thing about it is that you can get digital volunteers, so they don't necessarily have to be on, say, call. And you can be quite specific about what you would like the volunteer to do. As I say, I can't really highly recommend it enough. There's lots of support for organisations as well. If you were to join as an organisation, there's sort of regular online coffee mornings where you can talk to other people who are having volunteers, policy documents, all sorts of things. So it's definitely, Marissa's put the link in the chart. Have a look at it. As I say, it's absolutely free to join, but also volunteers. So if people, if anyone knows, or they're keen themselves to do some volunteering, if you've got a skill, especially around digital skills, it's something you might be interested in. We haven't got much time left. I don't know if we have any other questions. I'm not seeing anything in the chat room, and I don't see anyone else's hand up. There was something I noticed Marissa put in the chat. It was the conference that I mentioned earlier. It's on the 10th of March. So as individuals, you will be able to, or groups I should say, you could put a poster in. We will have a few people doing lightning talks, so that's just talking for 5 minutes. It is specifically around digital content of your archive rather than the physical objects. We know that most communities have quite a mix type of material in their collections, but we're sort of looking on the 10th of March at the digital content of archives, and it's a networking event as well. So it's very much about finding people similar to yourself and maybe working together with them, maybe even on a funding application. Abi will be there talking more about funding, and there'll be a lot of discussion around that as well. So I think really all I need to do, I'm not seeing any other hands up. I don't think I've missed anyone. Marissa, have I? No, just in case, is to thank our speakers, the doctors, CAHG and Abi Glen. Thank you for giving up your lunchtime today. That's very kind of you. And I'm very much hoping that everyone will be able to come along on the 10th. It'd be great to see you there. And again, the link is in the chat. Do let us know, do give us some feedback, because we'd like to do more of these webinars if they're of use. But otherwise, thank you very much for joining us today, and we will be sending out the recording as well with that little feedback form. Okay, thanks, bye.